everybody, and welcome to the Dev Morning Show at Night. I'm your host, Cassidy Williams. I do developer experience at various places, and I am joined by my lovely co-host, Zach Plata. Hey, Zach.
Yeah, I'm Zach, and I do dev relations at Rive, and that's it.
And Rive is launching a bunch of cool stuff recently. It's very exciting. And speaking of the DevRel sphere, we have an amazing guest today, Thuy Doan. She's a community engineer at Mux. Thuy, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you all for having me.
Could you tell us a little bit more about what your role is and also just the things that you do in and outside of work?
Sure. So at work, I am what's called a community engineer. I work at Mux. If I had to explain what a community engineer does, it's like a mix of somebody who does software development, but also makes content, like whether that's writing or making videos or being on podcasts or shows like this one with you two lovely people, all to help developers do the thing they do every day, which is develop. In Mux's case, it's to develop video applications.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of Mux. I've seen them at various hackathons and conferences throughout the years, pre and post pandemic. And by the way, your video is amazing, and so I can tell you work in video because your setup is lovely.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah, I'm still admiring the lamp in your background. That's something I need to steal from my own office.
It's a great lamp. So what else are you working on right now, Thuy?
Oh, it is in relation to Mux, but I started getting into open source for the first time, which is like exciting. Like I'm on a shallow level, like I'm excited to be like a little head in the repo, one of the contributors, but also
it's very fun to see your little face and be like, I did something.
Yes, I'm like one of these 7 beautiful people working on this thing that other people use. But it's also like a little nerve-wracking because this is the first time that I've contributed to open source. So I'm just like, are people gonna like find it useful? Like, are they gonna hate it? You know, what's gonna happen?
Right. Yeah, I think it's the best thing to do for your career, though, really. To when you contribute to open source, you're not only making software better for other people, but you're getting your name out there in a way that shows your technical prowess. And then in general, too, it's kind of just good for recruiting in general to find like people you might want to hire through contributors or to just find people you might want to bring onto a side project that you're building.
For sure.
That is so true. I'm just realizing, like, several times when I've talked to team members on my team and they're talking about like, oh, should we look at this person? The first thing they'll go to is their GitHub profile and see, have they made contributions to work open source or otherwise? And it's such a good way to just get a high level scope of, like what kind of stuff they do and what they're interested in.
Yeah, I've actually heard of people skipping certain steps inside of the interview process for maybe like a software developer position, but because certain people are so active like on GitHub doing open source or like making content, they can just be like, everything that I have to offer you can see like on GitHub.
Right. Yeah, and what's great about it too is it's not just writing code contributing to open source. Sometimes it's writing the docs, writing tests. Sometimes it's just making issues when you find bugs or triaging the existing issues to be just like, this is a real bug and I was able to replicate it on my machine.
Definitely.
Okay, this is now an awkward transition to an ad.
The Dev Morning Show at Night is a sponsored podcast. It means someone has to pay the bills around here. We're sponsored by LaunchDarkly, and LaunchDarkly is the first scalable feature management platform. That means dev teams can innovate and get better software to customers faster. How? By gradually releasing new software features and shipping code whenever they want, fast-tracking their journeys to the cloud, and building stronger relationships with business teams. Thanks for the money, LaunchDarkly.
At Mux in particular, you mentioned you're a community engineer, but what do you work on a typical day-to-day?
So for community engineers at Mux, we have like a breakdown that we've been told that we should like adhere as closely as possible to, but obviously depending on changing priorities and other team needs, it can look different. But right now the split is like, let me see if I can math pie chart in my mind. 40, 40, 20. I think that's right. I think 40% making content, 40%. I think I'm totally like blanking on my pie chart. I'm so sorry here.
What
I'm
is
so
my
sorry.
job?
Okay. In order to remember, I actually, inside of my work calendar, I have like blocks where it's like these 2 days should be these things, these 2 days should be these things, and then this last day should be another thing. So maybe like putting aside the numbers, that's how I break it down. Like 2 days might be like writing, 2 days might be building like a demo or something, or like working on a project that could include open source, and then the last day is like creative stuff. So like if I want to see what it's like to combine like AR with video, I can go off and do that. And if it turns into content, then it might be content. If it doesn't become anything, that's totally fine too.
Cool.
Fun. What is like the last fun thing that you did on one of those like creative Friday or one day things that you've done?
I'm actually failing at that right now. We recently got into this like, okay, we're clear what the division of time should be. I've only started getting into it, and I'm finding it super helpful because before, like, I would just take like every aspect of my job and be like, I have to do every single thing today, and then the same thing tomorrow. All 5 of those things, 3 of those things again the next day. But I'm focusing a lot better now that it's like, okay, today is the writing day, today's the coding day, because I don't know, I don't context switch very well. I don't know about you all.
Same.
But like,
I'm terrible at it.
no.
I actually, Thuy, I think we use the same to-do app, Centered, that allows you to like get into flow state and stuff. I actually organize my tasks in there by how easy it would be to context switch to that task, because otherwise it gets like kind of janky if you're just like emails and then code. Meanwhile, if I do like emails and then like GitHub notifications then code or something like that, it works better with my brain.
Gotcha. At first I thought you were going to talk about like there's like some secret hidden like labeling or something inside Centered, which I didn't know about, but
No, that would be a good feature request though.
Nice.
I'm gonna need y'all to teach me what that app is.
Yes, it's a glorified to-do list, but it yells at you.
Oh, Cassidy can yell at you.
Yeah,
Her
I can
voice is on it.
specifically yell at you in it.
Yes.
So there you
I'll
go.
just have you always on background.
Yeah, it actually is, because it's like me saying like, I'm guessing you're not focusing right now. And
Yeah. You could have a Zen like yogi voice being like, maybe it's time to get back on track. Or you can have Cassidy do that.
and then you can be like, shut up, Cassidy. Like I do when I occasionally have my own voice yelling at me.
Very useful. I am gonna have to look into that.
Yeah. Anyway, Thuy, what other tools do you use, like terminal, editor, etc.?
Editor, I use Visco code. Actually, I feel like I'm never consistent with the way that I call my editor. I'm like, is it VS Code? Is it Visco code? Or like sometimes you look at a word and you're like, have I been saying it wrong all the time? Like, is it spelled correctly?
When you
What's
learn it
wrong
by
with
reading.
my brain?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure it's VS Code, but I like Visco Code because it sounds like you're a Visco girl.
I sound so
coding.
numb saying like
Yes.
Visco code. I feel like it's one of those like I feel like I'm not consistent with saying GIF or GIF either. I just like oscillate between the two.
I feel like that is a more common thing than people realize. Like I tend to do GIF, but then depending on the context, I might say GIF. I've seen that a lot where people just happen to switch around a bunch.
Yeah, I feel like every time I go to say that word, I hesitate. And then if I want to be doubly right, I'll just say one version, and then the next time I say the word, I'll say the other version. So I'm like covering my bases.
Yeah. Yeah. You could be just like, I use animated PNGs, so it doesn't matter.
So, next question. What got you into this industry in DevRel?
So at my last company, I was there for like 5 years doing like product engineering stuff and some like internal tools. And then somehow I found myself writing about the stuff that I was learning. Like if I was like, what's up with arrays? I'd write about arrays, on like dev.to dev.to or dev.to. However, that's another one where I'm not sure.
I have no idea how that one's supposed to be pronounced.
But I started doing that on the side, and then I started craving doing that more and helping people by like airing out my thoughts or like my thought process or the things that I'm learning about code or about whatever. It doesn't have to be code either. And then just by like interacting with developers on Twitter, I found out that there was this like whole other area of development called like DevRel, like developer advocacy. And I'm just like, this is a job and I can get paid doing that?
I feel like that's the story of so many DevRels where it's just like, wait, I can do that?
Yeah, I don't have to do this thing on the side. I don't have to like context switch. I don't have to like go do my 9 to 5 software developer job and in the evening just like in the corner, like in the dark, writing your blog, you know?
All right, I'm transitioning us to the rapid fire questions. We're going to go back and forth and ask you some things. So we all have domain names that we're squatting on. What's a domain name that you're squatting on?
Side question is I'd love to know how many domain names you guys are squatting on. One is active. So I have 1, 2, 3, let's look. All my domains on Netlify. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 6 domains. Technically 2 are active, but 1 is the only one that I care about. So I'm squatting on 4, I would say. And one of them is very cringy. No, actually 2 of them are very cringy.
I love the cringe. Could we get a hint or a spewing of what the cringe is?
So at some point,
the pain in your face.
it's cringe because I at once upon a time thought it was good, like to the point where I'm like, maybe I'll get T-shirts with this saying on it.
Oh,
but
man.
The longer that I look at it, I'm just like, man, why did I think that was good? As a part of like my personal journey, I'm trying to like, what's it called, like uncover my ego, I guess, or like try to recognize when like I'm behaving this way because of pride, right? And I kind of like took that moment of like realizing, oh, that's a pride thing, or like, oh, that's an ego thing. And I changed it to some cringe slogan like, it's ego, baby. And I was like, we should make this a t-shirt. And I have a domain. It's egobaby.com. I'm just like,
I love it so much.
That is so fun.
oh,
so good.
What is the most recent thing you over-optimized?
So earlier I mentioned that I was doing open source work, specifically web components, which is my first time like working with web components. I am building an open source web component that's like an uploader so that people can like, they don't have to build their own like upload button. They don't have to like figure out how to direct uploads work. They don't even have to figure out their own progress bar. Like it's just built in.
Ooh.
But I think maybe because it's my first open source contribution, I'm trying to predict how people are going to use the thing and like trying to get ahead. Like part of it is like, yeah, like not predict, but like try to build something from the standpoint of the user, like the end user, which I think is good. But then there's the other, like I'm trying to predict like 100 steps in front. I'm just like, what is like the 200th person, if there's going to be a 200th person, what like niche problem are they going to run into, and trying to optimize for that. But I think some things you just have to release into the wild and see like how are they actually going to use it instead of trying to guess.
Yeah, it's such a rabbit hole when you're just like, let's think of every edge case possible, and then you end up just never shipping. What is your golden rule for coding?
I don't know if it's like a golden rule I apply to everyone, but like something that works for me, like a way of coding is that if I need to solve like a coding problem, an engineering problem, I need like at least 3 hours of runway. I cannot I don't do well by trying to force myself to work on a problem in this like 30-minute window between a meeting or even an hour. It doesn't work out very well. Because like I need
because you
buffer
know that
time.
you get into that zone of coding, and then coming up out of it, it takes longer than you think. It's a very gradual dip into it. It's not just code and then back doing other things.
Yeah, I think of it as like, so there's the middle section where you're actually in the zone, and then the beginning part is like you slipping into the zone, and then the end part is you coming out of your trance. And I need enough time for all of that to happen.
Agree.
All right. What's your favorite "it depends" question?
I think a recent one that came up in my work Slack channel was, is a hot dog
Oh, what's this one?
a sandwich? Okay. And like we can discuss, but I guess like I think my real answer is a hot dog is a hot dog. Like it's not, it's like its own thing. But I recently found out that something called the cube rule exists, and it has its own website and pictures.
Because I think according to the cube rule, a hot dog is a taco, right?
Yeah. And
Ugh.
yes, because like this, Zach, do you know about the cube rule? I think you both seem like you know about the cube rule.
I think I've heard of it, but like it's been a while, but I'm still flabbergasted probably every time that like this thing isn't a taco.
Yes. So I guess like the cube rule asserts that like whether something is a sandwich or a taco or a cake is dependent on what the starch structure is like. So a toast is like one flat piece of starch with stuff on it, you know? So I guess
Right.
like that would mean like bruschetta is a toast. And so it gets to the section about taco, and a taco is like this with stuff in it. And because a hot dog is technically that form, they assert that a hot dog is a taco. But I just cannot like agree. I cannot say that they're synonymous, you know?
Yeah.
I feel like the day that I see a hot dog under the taco section of a menu I will just walk out of like my own personal conscience, be like, no, it's not.
This is nonsense.
You're wrong.
What's the oldest piece of tech that you still own?
The pink like iPod Nano, I think it is. It's like the
A
thinner
classic.
one. Yes, with the wheel. I think it still had a wheel then. I don't know if I could find it, but I feel like my mom like kept all of my grade school stuff. So like I'm sure there are like really terrible drawings that are somewhere from grade 3. And I think like a floppy disk is somewhere in there.
It's a good one.
We were alive during the era of the floppy disk, you know?
We were. Good times.
All right. Have you written a piece of cringy code? And if you have, very briefly, what would that have been?
I'm sure that I've written cringy code. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. If I had to say, maybe like a cringy commit, but I feel like it's just like I have this obsession with writing. Like, you know how there's foo bar like as like sample text with code. My thing is like I like to put poop everywhere. So like
Same. So good.
Yeah.
Great
console
variable.
log commit poop. You know.
So we're all the same, huh?
Good. I'm glad we're on the same page here.
Nice.
What's your favorite programming pun?
I feel like I just got to default to you for this. I'm not a punny person. Like I am not a witty person. I think this is why I suck at games like Cards Against Humanity. I'm like very I never realized how literal I was until I tried to play like Cards Against Humanity. So like, you know, what's the movie? Drax. It's a Marvel. What is it? Guardians of the
Galaxy? Yeah.
Yes. There's a character there who's like, he doesn't get jokes. He's just like, everything is literal. I speak literally and I will take you literally. I'm kind of like that. So
Got it.
when we play, like when people play Cards Against Humanity, I try to make a sentence that makes sense rather than one that's funny. As I don't know, like my brain is slow. Like I don't know,
Not
but
slow.
Cassidy's
It
funny.
works in a different way, and I think that's
True.
fine.
Yeah.
True.
I can't blame you. Get it? Get blame? Yeah.
What's your most used emoji?
It's probably one of the new ones. So on the iPhone, there is one, like we already had like a happy cry, aw cry type of emoji, but there's a new one. There's a new one where the tears kind of like linger in its eyes, and it's just like,
The smiling tear. I love that
Oh,
one.
yes,
that's a
I
good
love
one.
it. Most used.
Now it is time for the random segment generator. We have a bunch of different segments, and we are going to randomly pick them, and we were going to ask you questions. So the first one is Dev Opposites. What do you do outside of your day job? What are your hobbies outside of being a developer, being a community engineer?
Outside of being a developer, I mean, okay. I still think of myself as a baker, even though I haven't baked in a while.
Ooh.
I like to think of it as being on hiatus. We are waiting for that stroke of inspiration. But at one time, I was baking like cakes, like cupcakes, cake
Wow.
donuts, tiered cakes. I got into like buttercream painting, and that was really fun.
Buttercream
But-
painting?
Buttercream painting.
I haven't
does
heard
that
that
mean?
term together before. Like maybe I've seen it, but is it what it sounds like?
Yeah, so have you ever seen like acrylic paint? Like it's like if you see it in a painting, you could see the texture. Like if there was a glob of paint on there, you could see that it's a glob of paint. It's a similar idea, except instead of like painting on a canvas, you're painting on a cake. And instead of painting with acrylic paint, you're painting with buttercream.
Oh my gosh. And then you get to eat it.
Yeah.
And then you get to eat it.
Wow.
Consuming art.
Yes, edible art. But like the thing is, I like to make it, but I don't like to eat it because I don't really like sweets. So it's kind of a conundrum.
Fascinating.
Wow.
So do you just bake for everybody around you?
I honestly, I bake so that I can prove to myself I can make the thing.
That's
And
fair.
then people
Respect
reap
that.
the benefits because everybody likes sweets more than I do.
That sounds great, and I wish you lived closer to me.
Yeah.
Feed
Where is
Cass.
that again? Where do I need to travel
Canada.
to? Yeah. Just a
Just a hop
on
in
the
and a
border.
skip across the border,
Yeah,
yes.
it
Yeah.
should be fine.
Moving on to our next segment. What do we got here? All right. What are you proud of? So tell me something that you shipped or created recently that you're super proud of.
A couple months ago, I did a talk at like an event for Code Bar, which is like a nonprofit organization trying to help people with development in Europe. And it was like a 3-day festival. On the third day, it was like well-being stuff. And outside of code, like I really am passionate about mental health stuff. And last year I like went through burnout and I really wanted to talk about it. But I remember feeling like vulnerable talking about that in front of people. And I almost didn't do it. But recently I remembered that I did do it because the video released. And I was like, I'm really proud that I ended up doing it. Like telling my story and also like challenging my own, I guess, like internalized like feeling of sharing your quote unquote weakness. Not really, it's just a human thing. So that's what I'm proud of.
That's awesome.
sharing.
Yeah.
I think being vulnerable is one of the best things to be proud of because it's so challenging, but it's so
Yes.
rewarding not only for yourself, but for so many people who get to hear what you have to say.
100%.
Yeah, I found that it's a lot more authentic, especially like at work when you're a lot more vulnerable with like your teammates or your manager, and then they can empathize a little more, and then it just becomes such a more natural like and fun environment to just be around and talk to people.
Yeah, it's really all that human stuff that I like the best. Like even when I'm bonding with coworkers, like I would rather us discuss whether a hot dog is a sandwich than I don't know, like Yeah, we work on code and stuff, and we got to talk about it at some point. But I like all that stuff. Like, I'd rather talk about TV shows and like
Yeah.
the stuff that you're going through and all that stuff.
It creates a psychological safety too, so that when you are
Yes,
in the weeds of
yes.
coding and stuff, then you can discuss it without having to like delicately figure out where this person is at in that given
Yeah.
place and time, where you can give them feedback in the way that they prefer, but then also you both know where the other person is coming from in various ways.
100%.
Okay, next one is launch lightly, crash darkly. What is your best advice for someone getting started in the software development world, the tech world?
Your path is probably not going to be linear. There are probably going to be developers that you admire, but ultimately, the type of developer that you're going to be someday, you don't have to model it off of anybody that you've seen. You can create that path. You can create your own definition. Someday, I don't know, someday you might become your definition of a great developer, whereas you were in the beginning trying to emulate somebody else. Be your own thing.
Yeah,
I love that.
I think along with that, it's good to just kind of log where you're at generally somehow, so that when you do get to a certain place, you can kind of look back and be like, wow, I actually did make it. And you can kind of compare yourself to your own growth rather than to someone else's.
Yeah, I've heard people say there's like this concept of a brag sheet. Like sometimes people
Yeah.
will like keep, I guess, a notes or a doc of their accomplishments so that they could tell somebody else, or I guess like you could hype yourself up. For me, I don't do that, but I think I measure my developer growth by seeing, kind of like noticing when I've developed intuition that I didn't used to have. Like, so for example, at the beginning of my career, I would just do things that were bad, like not good. Like, for example, you know how we talk about like keep it simple, or like try to write code that's clear for other people.
Right.
You might make those mistakes in the beginning and not be aware that that's a problem. But I've gotten to a place in my career where maybe I can't name all the code smells, but like I'm pretty sure this is bad. So yeah, so I'm there.
It reminds me of a time where there was one time where I was like struggling with this bug and I couldn't figure it out. And so I naturally Googled it and found a Stack Overflow. But the problem was the Stack Overflow answer I read that solved my problem was something that I wrote in the past.
Yes.
So it was like a combination of growth and regression all in one tidy package. Well, anyway, thank you so much, Thuy, for being on the show today. It was so fun to have you. I loved hearing all of your opinions about hot dogs and the things that you're doing in the world.
Food.
Where can people find you on the internet? Do you have any plugs for us, things that we should be looking at?
Yes. So I'm mostly on Twitter at clearly Thuy Doan, ClearlyThuydon. I'm also I have a personal podcast called Candid and Cringe. It's a podcast about growth in the roller coaster of life. On the podcast that I have, basically we just lean into all the things that we might not usually talk about that are like awkward or real. Like, for example, how do you deal with a situation where you're living with a roommate, but they're not meeting your expectations? They're not doing the chores, but you are. What you gonna do about it? That sort of stuff. And then aside from that, I guess I'll plug my company. I work at Mux. They're super awesome. They make video APIs for developers. Super exciting. We just had a conference that Cassidy went to.
It was a good
Cassidy
conference.
made an appearance.
You did great job.
You can find the talks at tmi.mux.com. We released a lot of we announced a couple of new things, including an API for real-time video. So check her out.
Cool.
Nice.
Well, and that being said, I'd like to close us out with some advice. And that advice is, it's ego, baby. So sometimes when you are getting down on yourself and you might be just like, I should be doing this better. I should be doing this better. Sometimes that is just a bit of pride getting in your way. And you need to kind of put that aside, be vulnerable with yourself, and just kind of accept that sometimes you might not be writing the best code. You just need to ship it. Get your work done. Try not to over-optimize it too much. And then you can always fix it later. It's not a reflection on who you are. And once again, because making podcasts is expensive, this show is brought to you by Launch Darkly. Launch Darkly toggles peaks of 20 trillion feature flags each day, and that number continues to grow. And you should use them. You can head over to launchdarkly.com and learn about how. Thank you for making this show possible, Launch Darkly. I've been Cassidy Williams. You can find me at Cassidoo, Cassidoo, on most things. I do developer experience at Remote and OSS Capital, and I look forward to finding you on the internet.
And I'm Zach, and you can find me on Twitter at Zach Plata, Plata. Again, I'm a DevRel at Rive, and happy to share more about animations and accessibility and things on the web.
Bye!